Hey guys, Poro here with the final pre-MSI 2026 video. This time I'm going to be doing my team rankings and also going through my pick'ems. For anybody who has only watched this video and hasn't seen the other ones, I already have 11 team breakdowns on my channel that I posted, as well as a ranking video for each of the 5 roles. So if you want more information, more details, then go check those out if you want to see exactly why I put some of the players where I did or what my general opinions on some teams are, because I'm only planning on going over each of the teams here for maybe like a minute. Okay, we're going to start at the bottom and go all the way up until we get to the team who I think has the highest chance to win the tournament. So, starting in 11th, I have Deep Cross. Deep Cross is a team who I think are not going to have the macro or the cleanliness to be able to do damage at a tournament like this. They are a very new and inexperienced team. A lot of their players have a lot of inconsistencies. You can see if you take a look at my player ratings real quick, you can see that 4 of the Deep Cross players are dead last. That's not me saying that I think that they're bad players. It's more of just a testament to the fact that they coin flip a lot, and if they're playing at their best, maybe they could be a little bit better, but I'm not expecting that to happen. I think Pop9 and Feng will have issues at the tournament. Xiaoxi and Hongsuo maybe more just decent players who are not necessarily at this level, and then the only player on this team who I think could have a very impressive showing or who could have a breakout international would be their rookie top laner Florin. Overall, I'm expecting them to come in and just be overwhelmed by TL and KC. I think there's a chance that they could throw hands. They could definitely make the games interesting because these players do have good mechanics. So there's a chance that they come out, they go for some plays, they get some leads, they show up to fights, make it really chaotic. But I think at the end of the day, when we get into the mid games and the late games, I don't believe Deep Cross have it in them to put together 3 wins against either of those teams, which is why I have them in last. In 10th, I've got TL. So I think TL will be the second team out of the play-in tournament. This team has some issues. They are a slow team, one of the slower teams at the tournament. They're definitely not at Lion's slow level of play, but they are still slow, and we are in a very fast meta. I think that this team also has other problems. I think that there are a couple of players who are underperforming expectations from the start of the year. Hosea stepped up big time. Core has stepped up as well, but Jan and Morgan maybe not quite looking how we were hoping they would look. And if those players are not at the level that was advertised, then TL will not be able to do damage internationally. I think that TL have some problems with their drafting and coming up with good game plans past, let's just put our players on our best champions. So I feel like they will be able to use their default macro and team play to be better than Deep Cross, but when it comes to playing against a stronger team like KC, who has very good team fighting and does have good team play and good map movements, I feel like they will be overwhelmed and they'll show up to the 5v5s with not that much of a lead because they don't really develop too many leads, or at least not as much leads as the other teams at this tournament, and then they'll simply be outplayed in that 5v5. That's what I'm expecting to happen when TL goes against KC. Then next, so the one way that I could do this is that I could say like KC's going to come in 9th because T1's going to make it out of play-ins, but what I would rather do this as is my opinion on how strong I think the teams are, and the team that I think is the 9th strongest at this tournament is Team Secret Whales from the LCP. I'm a big Secret Whales fan. Every single international I come in and I hype them up and I say that they can do some damage, and they're a fantastic early game team. They are one of the teams who can generate the biggest leads the fastest. Domestically, they will get 8k, 10k, 12k gold leads by 15-20 minutes, and the game will be over before you can even blink. But the reality is that because they stomp domestically so hard like this, they haven't had the time to learn how to play mid and late game properly against higher levels of competition. The other 2 times that they went to an international, they did manage to have good early games and they had good game states, but they couldn't put it together to be able to win the macro game. And I know for a fact that the issue isn't their team fighting, because they're one of the best team fighting teams at the entire tournament. If you watch footage of them playing 5v5 or 5v5s, or if you watch footage of them playing comps with combo pieces, they layer these combos brilliantly. Their timing together is fantastic. But the issue is that they're not the best at getting there, at properly setting up these objectives in the first place, of connecting everybody on the team together before the fight starts. And these are the factors that limit them from being able to win those mid-late games against better teams. I think a big part of their lack of winning on on an international stage is that while they do manage to get leads still, and sometimes big leads, international teams, these teams of higher level competition, Secret Whales will still find good plays against them. But these better teams are more resilient. They're more resistant to the plays. Instead of 4 people dying to a play, maybe 2 people dies and then everybody gets out. Or maybe if Secret Whales go for 10 plays, instead of 8 of them working, only 5 of them work. And then so instead of ending up with an 8k gold lead, Secret Whales only has a 3k or 4k gold lead to work with, and that is much easier for them to throw. And so I think that at this tournament, they do have a chance to get leads against anybody, but it's not that likely that they'll be able to close it out, especially in best of 5 format against a lot of these other teams, which is why I have them in 9th. I think they can make any series exciting. I think there's a chance that they could win against a number of teams, but I don't believe it's likely. In 8th, I'm going to put Lion. So I am definitely a Lion doubter heading into this MSI. Lion is the slowest team at the tournament. I feel like they have some issues that cause them to play slower than maybe they would want to. For example, Isles is mostly tasked with sticking around Berserker, so he doesn't sync up with Inspired as much, and Inspired already isn't necessarily the most aggressive jungler, so if the two of them aren't making plays together and Inspired isn't going out and making plays on his own and neither is Isles, then the pace of the early games is going to be very slow. They don't make very many plays. The plays that they do go for tend to work, but they don't open up very many massive leads. And so when they play against a bunch of these other teams who do open up massive leads, I feel like they will get overwhelmed through the early game and they'll have to go back to resorting to their bad habits, which involves sacking every objective and betting the entire game on one moment. And even when they do bet the entire game on that one moment, a lot of times their team fighting isn't the cleanest out there, and then so they'll just lose that moment and then they'll lose the game. Lion's big advantage is that because they don't make very many mistakes and because they keep the game at a slower pace, if a team isn't better than Lion, if a team isn't proactive enough and isn't clean enough at closing games out, Lion will win. Lion are like a brick wall that feasts off of these unclean teams. I think that if Lion were to go against a Secret Whales or a Deep Cross or a TL or even a team like Furia, I feel like it could be a bad matchup and Lion could end up taking that. But overall, based on the merits of their own gameplay, I just feel like they have a lot of different yellow flags that they need to work through that make me not believe in them as a unit. In 7th, I have KC. So I think that KC is a better team than people are giving them credit for heading into this tournament. KC threw hands with G2. A lot of people want to rate G2 very highly and forget about the fact that every time that KC and G2 match up against each other, it's a highly competitive series. In the first 3 games of Grand Finals, KC had the upper hand against G2, and it looked like they might be the ones who could win. And I would love to see what people's evaluation of KC would have been if they were the 1 seed, because it almost feels to me like people would have, if G2 had lost, that people would have just moved Jisoo down the rankings instead of moving KC up. But the reality is that KC is a very good team. Yike is an extremely good jungler at the moment, is a very underrated jungler. They have solid laners who are able to get through most of the game, and then while their bot lane might have some laning struggles, they're also both excellent team fighters. And in fact, everybody on the team is an excellent team fighter. I feel like if KC can show up to an objective situation with even gold and a good team comp, they have a chance to win a team fight against most of the teams here. There were multiple occasions in playoffs where they would play against G2 or MKOI, and then they would end up in bad situations. I believe even against GX had a massive gold lead in game 1. They were up like 5k gold or something, but against all these teams, those teams will show up with gold leads and good game states. They'll show up to an objective and they'll have their game plan, but then KC will just out team fight them and then they'll win the game. They're a very scary opponent, so I think it's worth moving them all the way up here and saying that they are in fact a formidable team who could take games off of a multitude of opponents. And unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get to see that because they are in play-ins. So what will most likely happen is that they'll have a showdown against TL and then they'll lose to T1 and then that will be that. But if they were in the main stage, or if they had the opportunity to prove it against some of these other 1 seeds from the non-LCK LPL regions, I feel like they could show off their skill a little bit more, and I'm hoping that they can maintain their form and then we can see them in the Worlds format where they'll get to play against more lower level teams. In 6th, this is a big placement. I'm putting Furia in 6th, and right away the thing that might jump out is that you may say, wait, but if I look purely at the Furia player rankings, their players are rated lower across the board than some of these other teams. Like if you look at KC, for example, Kana way higher than Gigo, Tadu and Yike right next to each other, Yahoo and Toots right next to each other, Kalist way higher than Ayu, Busio higher than Jojo. So why, if all of KC's players are apparently better than Furia's players, do I think Furia is the better team? And it's because I think that of every single team at this tournament, Furia is by far the team that personifies more the more than the sum of its parts moniker. Furia have excellent team play. They have some of the best game plans I've seen on a global scale. The way that they find advantages in draft and then accelerate those advantages extremely quickly to come up with big leads is really awesome. Something that Furia does really well that some of these other teams, even some of the top teams, I see them don't do stuff like this, is that Furia seems to always have a very good sense for where they are allowed to be on the map and therefore where the enemy is not allowed to be. Furia has these amazing chase down sequences where it seems like the team that they're playing against has control of an area, but then Furia just calls them out on their bullshit. They just have the knowledge to know, hey, you're actually not allowed, even though it looks like you're allowed to be here, everything intuitively says that you're allowed to be here, you're actually not. And if we just click at you, we will win and we will progress the game forward. They're very good at that. They're very good at playing Baron sequences. Their jungle and support link up together and play for the lanes very well. Everybody on the team has a role to play and they all fit together perfectly. And the engine that makes the team go is Tadu. Tadu is a phenomenal jungler. I think that he's getting up there. He's a top 15 jungler in the world, pushing into that top 10 territory. I think he's going to impress a lot of people at this tournament. And even if Furia get the short end of the stick, even if they end up playing against an Eastern opponent in round one, and that, well, actually, I'm sure the matchups have already been determined and I just haven't bothered to look yet. But like, let's say that one of their matches is against an Eastern opponent and their other matches against like G2 or something, then like sure, they might end up bowing out of the tournament early, but I feel like if people pay attention to the way that they're playing the game, they will be super impressed with just the amount of team play and coordination Furia have. I think the future is looking bright for the CBLOL, and this is definitely the most promising team in that region by far. Fifth, we're going with G2. So G2 have a lot to prove at this tournament. They went to first stand, had a big showing at first stand where they went all the way to grand finals and placed second. But the teams that they beat in order to get there are completely stylistically different from the four Eastern teams that we're seeing at this tournament. By Eastern, I mean LPL and LCK. G2, when they were at first stand, they had good matchups into FearX and Gen G because those teams are slower teams. G2 is a team that makes proactive plays and gets leads in a more consistent way than some of these other squads. Like there are other aggressive squads who like to get leads, like Deep Cross and Secret Whales and Furia. These teams make a lot of plays. They do a lot of stuff around the map. Even maybe like Top Esports or T1. These teams do a lot on the map to try to get leads, but some of their plays are misses. Sometimes the consistency in that early game isn't necessarily there. G2 has a lot of consistency in the early game. Their early games aren't as powerful. They don't do as much, but when they do stuff, it tends to be good. So when they play against slower paced teams, like a lot of the LEC teams are slower paced because there's this mentality in the LEC that carry jungling is more viable. So you see a lot of the junglers pick up carry junglers, which slows down the pace of the game. Or when they play against slower LCK teams, the leads that they get stick. And then after that, all they have to do is figure out how to not throw the leads, how to progress the games forward and win from there, which is much easier said than done. But I believe that is one of the reasons why G2 is able to beat the LCK, but then couldn't really find much ground against BLG both times, because BLG is a team that does more early. They are extremely aggressive, and so they get bigger leads than G2. They outpower G2 in the early game. And then G2 aren't necessarily the cleanest mid-late game team either, so if they fall behind like that, sometimes they have the clutch factor and are able to come back in, but a lot of times against these strong teams, they will just lose, which I find really interesting because BLG, Top Esports, Hanwha Life, and T1, stylistically, that's closer to 4 LPL teams almost. Like HLE and T1 are by far the two most aggressive LCK teams. I think right now the meta really favors aggressive teams, which is why we're seeing these teams here, and one of the reasons why Gen G didn't end up making it. And then so I want to see G2's matchup against these 4 teams, because to me, it looks almost as if G2 is going to have to face 4 different BLGs instead of facing a standard LCK team. And I don't know how those matchups are going to look and whether they'll just get overwhelmed. If they can place 4th or higher, if they can prove that they have what it takes to overcome this fast style of play in this double elimination bracket, then I'm probably going to completely reevaluate what I think of this squad and what I think of the LEC as a whole, because maybe they are just a stronger team and a stronger region than I gave them credit for. But to me, this is kind of the last hurdle they have to pass before I'm willing to just open the floodgates and start moving them up way higher in the standings. I think if G2 want to do well, all of their players have to do well. Their jungle support synergy has to be great. Caps has to be consistent throughout the tournament, which he wasn't at first stand. Hans has to show the form that he showed against the two LCK teams at first stand and not dip in performance the way that he did against BLG. And Broken Blade, also his laning has to be good enough. Like the last time that he went to MSI, it was a disaster. And the last time the G2 went to MSI, it was not very good. They need to avoid any of that. And if they can all play to their best, then yes, there is a chance that they can top four. But I have to see it to believe it, because I think that these top four teams are all stylistically very good matchups against G2. In fourth, I have Top Esports. I'm seeing a lot of tier lists where people have G2 over Top Esports, and listen, I get it. Top Esports, they got 3-0'd by BLG in Grand Finals. A lot of people tune in to a domestic Grand Finals, and then they watch Top Esports and they're like, wow, this team sucks. And then you go look at their playoffs run to get there, and it's like, okay, who did they beat? They beat some teams that aren't necessarily as big. Still, Top Esports did stomp their way to Grand Finals, and also their regular season, at least the first half of it, was great. For a while, they looked like the best team in the world. I think that this team, some of their players are going very underrated because Top Esports is a org that's known for choking internationally, and these players are known for choking internationally. Tia and Jackie Love, these players are considered chokers. Zoyan, Feng Yue, these are new players to the scene who are completely unproven. So if you go with those expectations, and if you go with their grand finals result where BLG just completely mollywopped them, then yes, you're going to think that Top Esports isn't actually that good, and there's a chance that G2 can beat them and whatever. But at the end of the day, when Top Esports are playing at their best, they're one of the best teams in the world. They are one of the most jungle-centric teams, which is the meta right now, in terms of progressing early games forward very quickly and making the game about jungle and about the plays that the options that jungle has. Top Esports are the biggest personification of that style. That's the way that TN plays. He's a very sink or swim player who will win the entire game through jungle by minute 10. He makes both junglers the main characters of the game, and a lot of times if he's in form, he just takes the other jungler and he rolls them like a blunt, and then that's the series. So as always, I don't like to rate teams with the assumption that they will choke. Even if historically they do, I try to rate teams based on the merits of what they did in the last split. So I'm once again going to look towards Top Esports with optimism, and I'm going to say that I do think this team is very good and they can beat anyone. And we'll wait and see if I end up being disappointed that they choked, but I'm not going to rate them lower with the assumption that they'll choke. I feel like that's unfair. And don't you worry, if Top Esports do choke, I will be there for it, and I will be loud and unhappy about it, and there will definitely be some flame. But until that happens, I'm keeping them over G2. In third, I'm going to have T1. So I think it's a very good meta for T1 right now, and it's very fast-paced, chaotic meta, as I keep on mentioning. I also think that T1 has the right aggressive playstyle to be able to topple a lot of these teams. Every single player on this roster has the ability to be at the top of their role at any given time. I do think right now that adding pace to the roster has injected a little bit of new life into the team, where because T1 are more willing to kind of prioritize bot side and get bot side ahead, Doran's playstyle makes a lot more sense with this team. The pressure that he draws allows pace to farm more and be where he wants and fights more. Faker has that magnet where everybody just obsesses over killing him, and so entire enemy teams will launch themselves at Faker. They'll launch 4 members at Faker to kill him, but then T1 are able to get cross maps and it's not actually worth it. Like, Pays being on a team with these types of players and then also having the support of a great player like Cario, these factors allow him to farm up these insane CS numbers, and then he's able to carry the mid and late games, and this is how T1 has been playing lately. With all of this activity on the map though, a big part of what makes T1 go is how Owner is performing on the day. And I think that Owner has the ability to be the best jungler in the world, and I think that there have been times in this split where you could say that he was a top 2 jungler in the world. But in the short playoffs run that T1 had, I thought that across the board, Owner was not playing as well as I would have wanted him to, especially against HLE. It felt like he got ran by Kanavi. He was making a lot of very weird decisions and mistakes. It was a big part of as to why it felt like HLE was the team in the driver's seat for the entire series. So if Owner plays like that, then T1 will struggle to win the event. But if Owner's able to step up and play the way that he has in past seasons, then yes, T1 can win it all. And then of course they have the international Faker buff. People say that the Faker buff only exists for Worlds because T1 haven't won MSI recently, but no, the Faker buff still definitely exists for MSI. Some of the plays that he's made in recent MSIs are still ridiculous. He has some ridiculous highlights. I think third is the right spot to put T1. The other teams, the main reason why they're above T1 is because BLG is the first stand champion, so they're coming in as one of the favorites. And then of course HLE took down T1 pretty convincingly in playoffs, so they also have to be rated over T1. Then we get to the big two, the final two. Who do I think is more likely to win the tournament? And for me, the team that I have in second is BLG. So BLG have some of the best players in the entire world right now. They have the best solo lanes. On is playing out of his mind. These three players are definitely the best in their respective roles individually. And they also play a perfect brand of League of Legends. Of all of the teams at this tournament, BLG are by far the best early game team. They are the most aggressive, the team that will put you in the dirt as fast as possible. However, I have some questions for BLG, kind of in the same way that I do about G2, specifically about matchups. If you look at BLG's first stand run, some of the teams that they played against, they went to 5 games against FearX. They had an extremely back and forth against FearX, and then they never got to play against Gen G. The other teams that they played against were JDG and G2 twice. And you can say that, that's no fault of BLG. They can only play the opponents that they were given. If G2 beat Gen G, then that means that at that tournament, G2 is a better team than Gen G. So if G2 makes the grand finals, that doesn't undermine the accomplishment that BLG had at all. But what it does do is that it makes me want to question, how will BLG do against teams that are cleaner than them in mid to late game, because BLG does still make a fair amount of mid late game mistakes. They had multiple occasions, more so than any other top team at this tournament. They had multiple occasions where they had big leads in playoffs and then found a way to throw it back to even game states or losing game states, or if they had a massive lead, it would go back to just a modest lead. They make a lot of plays that end up in negative 4K gold swings or negative 5K gold swings. And so had they played against a slower team like Gen G, I wonder, do they get their early leads but then get overwhelmed in the mid and late game? We didn't get to figure out at first stand. And there is one very strong team at this tournament that I do think has a cleaner mid and late game than them. It's HLE. That's why I'm going to have HLE above BLG. So I'm really interested to see that matchup. I think HLE have what it takes to throw hands with them early. And then if they end up getting past that 20-minute mark and the gold lead isn't massive, then I do think HLE should win out over time. But overall, that's essentially what you need to know about my thoughts on BLG. I think the meta is really good for them. I think they have a lot of good matchups at this tournament. I think they are by far the best early game team at the entire tournament. But when it comes to that mid late game, I'm still a bit skeptical of them. I don't know if I fully trust them just yet. If they win this tournament, it will be huge for them because it'll prove something to me that they can take two very aggressive yet also cleaner LCK teams, like LCK teams that are cleaner than them, that they can beat both of those teams in a double elimination format. That would be massive for them and would make me believe that they can golden road if that's the type of team that they're going to be. But for now, I would say that I'm leaning more towards like BLG, maybe 30% chance that they win the tournament for me, and then HLE maybe closer to like 40%. I think it's close, but I do just slightly favor HLE. HLE is, in my opinion, the second best early game team at the tournament. I think that they play a super aggressive brand of League because they have all subscribed to the Kanavi philosophy. Kanavi is the player that makes this team go. Kanavi is currently the best jungler in the world and has an argument for being best player in the world. Right now, I would give that to Knight, but Kanavi is definitely right there behind him. And so I think generally all of the other teams at this tournament, if they play against HLE, they're just going to get completely overwhelmed. And then that will be that. And the matchup that I'm really excited to see is, okay, what does it look like when HLE match up against BLG? And it's going to be super fun because both teams are topside centric teams. Both teams have AD carries who are willing to take a step back, maybe play more on weak side, maybe play more utility. And then they both have psychopathic roaming supports who run around trying to enhance their strong solo lanes and their proactive junglers. So it's gonna be a battle of the top sides. It's gonna be really fun. And basically, I do think that BLG will get leads against HLE more of the time, but HLE is a good enough early game team that there will be some games where they're the ones who get the early game lead. And then the big question for me is that I feel like some of the mid late game play that I've seen from HLE is cleaner than anything BLG has done in late game. HLE do throw leads. They definitely had some scares. In their series against T1, I vividly remember that they had a massive lead in game 1 and then had a little spooky, scary incident, and then the closeout wasn't clean. So they definitely can have the same issues as BLG, but I think that more often than not, they are able to hold on to their leads and snowball the game to victory more often than BLG does. So that's it for my team rankings. It's a little bit boring having, you know, 4 Eastern teams and then G2, but it is what it is. I'm not going to swap up my rankings for entertainment's sake. And now we'll take a brief look at my pick'ems. I don't really give a shit about pick'ems, to be honest. I never have, but people keep on asking me to show them, so I'll show them. So here's my play-ins. Should be fairly standard. I'm sure that this is what most people's pick'ems look like. So T1, KC, T1, T1, and then I have TL beating Deep Cross and KC beating TL. I think regardless of what happens here, there's like a 95% chance that T1 makes it out, so that's not really a huge deal. And then, let's take a look at the crystal ball. Where's the crystal ball? Crystal ball. So here's my crystal ball. I didn't think too hard about this. I kind of just did it based on vibes. So for MSI play-ins, which champion I went Lee Sin, the reason why is because every single matchup in play-ins have Lee Sin enthusiasts. So Owner, Pop9, Jose, Diodo, and Yike all have logged games on Lee Sin. And if you take Yike out of there for a second, Owner, Jose, and Pop9 love Lee Sin. Like, Lee Sin is probably the best champion for all of those players. So I'm expecting that to be very high prio. I'm expecting it, even after it got nerfed, I would expect it to show up in every play-in series at least once, which is the same reason why I have which champion will have the most kills being Lee Sin. Normally this would go to an 80 carry, but I am pretty unless pro teams just think the Lee Sin nerfs killed the champion, I'm fairly confident that Lee Sin will show up in every game, and whenever Lee Sin shows up, he's a very active champion who, you know, his Q is an execute, so he'll probably be picking up a fair amount of kills. Which champion will have the lowest win rate? I put down Karma, because I believe that Karma has been nerfed hard enough. She's received multiple nerfs individually that are all small, so not that noticeable, but then there were also system nerfs, like all of her items got nerfed, all of the engage items got buffed. I think that she is not the best support for playing with junglers, which I think is really important right now, so I feel like the meta should be shifting away from Karma. I don't think this is a Karma meta, but I do think that a lot of pro teams will be slow to realize that, and they will continue to lock her in and will not find as much success with her as they did in regular season. So I have her as lowest win rate. Highest win rate, I have Camille, purely because I think that the only people who are going to be bold enough to pick Camille support are going to be the best supports in the world. Like Keria might pick it, On might pick it, Delight might pick it, and when these teams pick it, I mean, like those are the favorites to win the tournament, right? BLG, HLE, T1. So every time Camille support shows up, I would expect it to be from a really good support, and therefore a high likelihood that that team will win. That's why I have this pick. Which pro will have the highest KDA? This almost always goes to an 80 carry, although I think that you could also put down Knight for this, and it might be reasonable because Knight has some ridiculous KDAs. I went with Pays. Which pro will earn the highest CS in a single game? I went with Guma because I feel like at least one time every single split and every single international, Guma ends up having like one hyper carry game where the entire team is funneling him and he has like ridiculous CS numbers. So I went with Guma, also because T1 HLE is a bit of a fiesta team. So I feel like there's a chance that he might end up on a hyper carry and the game might end up being a long time. Kanavi, I had for first blood. It's rare that junglers are the first blooders, I'm pretty sure, but I still tend to try to go with the most aggressive jungler anyway, because I think that that's the role where they are the most likely to be involved in the first play of the game, and Kanavi's very aggressive, so if he ends up taking the kill, I wouldn't be too surprised. Which pro will finish with the highest damage per game? I went with Pays. Which team will win the shortest game duration in play-ins? T1. Which team will kill the most Elder Dragons? I just went with T1 because it seems like T1 always ends up in crazy Elder Dragon scuffles, as is the LoL esports script. Which team will get the least kills in a single game? I went with TL. I think that there will be a game where TL just get monster shut out by T1 because TL is a slow team and T1 is also just a much better team. So who knows? We might see a goose egg tonight. There's a chance that we will see a TL goose egg against T1. I wouldn't be surprised. Which team will play the most unique champions? I went with BLG because Knight and On play a ridiculous amount of champions, and I also expect BLG to go very deep in the tournament. I expect BLG to play the most amount of series that you can. What will be the highest number of kills in a single game? I went with 0 to 30. How many unique champions will be picked? I went with 0 to 99. This is probably going to be wrong, but honestly, I didn't know. I feel like a lot of times splits will end up in the 90s, so I just went with this, and we'll... sometimes with these, it's fun to gamble. It's fun to pick the like range and then just gamble and see if you get it right or not. Will team will be picked? No, because ADD isn't here. Which champion will be banned the most? I went with Nocturne. I don't think it's necessarily an amazing Nocturne meta, but Nocturne has been perma-banned in a couple of regions, and there are also good Nocturne players at the tournament, so I wouldn't be surprised if teams just continue doing that. Then we have the Rift Pick'ems, the Rift GG Pick'ems, which ended up being a little bit different. So same bracket, with the T1s across the board, and then the Crystal Ball. Which champion will be picked the most? I said Xin Zhao. Even though Xin Zhao is getting nerfed, I feel like it's a standard enough jungler that every jungler at the tournament is good at, that he'll show up at least once every series, and he's also not high enough prio that I think it'll just be permabanned, so I went with him. Which champion will be banned the most? I went with Varus. This seems to be a champion that people are obsessed with banning, even, like, regardless of whether it's strong or not, it just gets banned a lot. Which champion will have the highest win rate? I went with Ziggs. I think that right now we're in a spot where Ziggs is used as a very effective counter pick by top tier teams, and it almost always goes into the bot lane position. Or if not, it's because Knight gets it, and Knight is an insanely good Ziggs player. So I feel like we'll only see Ziggs a few times, and it'll always be in spots where Ziggs is very good. So I put him there. Which champion will have the lowest win rate? I went with Galio. I don't remember why I did this, but I guess it's just one of those things where it's like, I think that Galio has good spots, but at the end of the day, the damage is a bit lower. So if you end up falling behind on the pick, or if you're a worse team and you pick this champion, sometimes you just end up running into a brick wall where it just becomes hard to win the game at a certain point, even if the champion is good. Which champion will have the most solo kills? I went with Akali. The reason why is because I think that ever since Gunblade got added, Akali has become like a big side lane threat and is able to get a lot of kills on side, has the most in lane kill opportunities. And there's also a bunch of really good Akali players at the tournament, so I feel like she'll be locked in a fair amount. Which player will have the best average rift rating? I went with Knight. Who will have the most solo kills? I went with Caps. Caps is a solo kill demon. Which player will steal the most epic monsters? I had Kanavi. Which player will have the most average damage a minute? Pays. Who will have the most deaths in one game? I went with Feng. I'm almost certain Feng will have at least one game where he just goes like 1-11 or something. Which team will have the longest average game time? I went with Lion, because I think that Lion are going to be out of the tournament fast, so the sample size will be low, and then they're a slow team, so I'm hoping that they just have a few 40-minute zero kill bangers. Which team will get the shortest game win? I went with T1, mainly because they get to play, they're an aggressive team and they also get to be in play-ins. Which team will have the highest gold to 15 minutes? BLG. Elder Drakes, T1. Which team will play the most different champions? BLG. Then we have which Drake will be killed the most. For this, I always go either Infernal or Cloud, because those are the two Drakes that are the easiest to kill. The other Drakes all have some kind of annoying secondary effect that make them hard to kill, so this one is always up to luck, but my kind of brain is that teams will kind of subconsciously not want to do some of the more annoying ones like Ocean and Chemtech, and then they will gravitate towards taking the Infernals and Clouds faster. What will be the longest game duration? I went with 50 minutes plus. I don't actually believe this, but it's fun to gamble on the range, so I went 50 minutes plus. How many unique champions will be picked? For some reason, Rift has 75 plus as their option. I'm almost certain that there's going to be more than 75 champions picked, so this has to be the right one. For reverse sweeps, I almost always go with 0. I feel like reverse sweeps are fun when it happens, but not supposed to be likely. And then which team will win the event? I decided to go with HLE. So those are what my pick'ems look like, and that's my team tier list, and that is everything I have for you for this one. I have a Patreon for people who want to support the channel more. The link to that will be in the description. I post fun stuff there like scripts, tier lists, and Poro drawing videos. If you sign up for the $10 tier, I'll even draw you a custom Poro like the ones on the screen now. Also worth mentioning that I have co-streaming rights, so if you want a co-streamer to watch MSI with, I will be watching most of the event on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/psychopathicporo. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all, I guess, when I see you. Bye.